awesome. Joining us on the line right now is the man known as the world's most dangerous man. Obviously, he's a UFC Hall of Famer and a super fight champion, a former WWE Intercontinental as well as World Tag Team Champion, former NWA World Champion, former King of Pancrase. He is basically the man. He is Ken Shamrock. Ken, welcome to the two-man power trip.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Obviously, I mean, all those accolades, you got so much going on right now in your personal life, but I mean, what a career. Let's talk today about Valor, bare knuckle fighting. You got a huge show coming up in September. Let's first start off talking about what's going on and what your product is going forward with Valor.
Yeah, I fell in love with bare knuckle way back in the beginning when the Holes Bar came out. Then, of course, it got taken away with putting gloves on, trying to make it safer, so-called safer. So I always thought to myself, if I had the opportunity, I was going to bring it back. So me and my business partner, Des Woodruff, started doing some research, looking at trends and how things were going, and all these little bare knuckle organizations started coming up, and the things that were on the social media sites were getting huge hits. And so we said, well, let's do it. Let's watch and see what these guys do, see the good and the bad things that are happening, and then let's throw our hat over the fence and let's do it. Let's start out with the professional organization, with top of the elite fighters, and let's make a statement in bare knuckle with Valor. So that's how it kind of got started, was my love for it. And then, of course, Des did some research on it. Next thing you know, we're sitting here getting ready to launch 4 weeks out, man, getting ready to launch a very professional organization with some top quality fighters.
I love it. Bare knuckle is becoming popular again, like you said. And obviously, with you kind of spearheading it, it's going to get a lot of attention. A lot of more people are going to get interested. What is going to go on as far as scouting some talent? Obviously, you got a lot of good heavyweights and a lot of name quality. Is that what you kind of wanted to go for at first? Some guys that'll pique some interest of some casual fans.
Yeah, we want kind of a mixture too. Like, we want to make sure we have some boxing in there. We got Ishii in there. We got some MMA guys. That have been around a while with good backgrounds, good experience, good records. We got some guys from England. We got people from different countries. So we wanted a wide variety of different type of style of fighting, and also people from different countries.
And this big show will be going on Saturday, September 21st, at the Bears Casino down in Newtown, North Dakota. Is that something where it's going to be hard to kind of get certain locations? It's legal some places, not legal in other places?
Well, I think that it's a matter of education. It's a matter of the acceptance starting to roll out now already. You already said that, it's starting to pick up. So other states have already reached out to us and asked us if we wanted to do the very first bare knuckle show when they open up their states. So I think that it's starting to roll out. People are starting to see the science behind it, starting to see the safety as far as not what has been said as far as not being safe. It's just not true, and I think people are starting to realize that, so they're starting to open it up to a lot of different states.
And what will kind of set you guys apart from some other bare knuckle fighting leagues that have been popping up?
Well, first of all, I think you look at our card. I think we're going to have a lot from top to bottom. We're going to have a lot more qualified fighters all the way through the card, not just one or two fights. All the way through the card, we're going to have really top talent fighters, guys that have good reputations, good backgrounds, and quality fighters. So I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is I think that our production team, the way that people will be able to watch the fight, I think we go to another level where we step in the void that the UFC left because they went on to ESPN. We're going to step into that void that they left in the pay-per-view market. We got all the same kind of coverages that the UFC that they had when they were in that pay-per-view market. So I think that we have a better professional run organization from top to bottom, and I think that you're going to see the class of fighters is going to be a little bit different.
And as far as where you could see a pay-per-view and things like that, and you making announcements, what was the big announcement that you made about the heavyweights?
We were going to allow the fans, and we did that yesterday, to be able to match the first round of the tournament. The fans will be able to pick which fighters they want to fight each other, and the ones that pick the most, those fighters will then fight each other in the first round, so the fans get to be involved in that tournament.
Very, very cool. And you got some good names as far as some heavyweights out there. I mean, everyone should know Sokaju, obviously, Mighty Mo, Godbeer, McSweeney. So, I mean, these are some name quality guys that you may know from the MMA world, right?
Absolutely. You know, these guys all got good credentials, but the one thing that stands out to me and that is very interesting to me as a fighter is can these guys transition from whatever they were doing into bare knuckle? Because bare knuckle is a different beast. It's not the same as a boxer. Boxers used to have bigger gloves to block punches. So now they have to use their feet more and their movement more, not to be able to use their hands to block because you're not going to be able to because punches are going to get through. So you got to use your footwork. Can they transition, into that bare knuckle? Can MMA? Can they transition? That to me is what the most interesting thing is whether or not these guys can transition into bare knuckle.
That will be very interesting to see because you see a guy like Chris Lieben who was out there doing bare knuckle was kind of had a step up in a lot of these guys, and you would think that maybe he wouldn't. So that is a very interesting point that some guys are going to be able to adapt and transition a lot better from the different variations of different sports that they're doing.
And I think it's also a mindset too. As some guys are able to adapt a lot quicker than some. So some guys are just great athletes and they're able to adapt into the world that they're in very quickly.
Now, as far as you, I mean, that's always on everyone's mind. That they think of you as the fighter. Obviously, you're the boss and you're in charge. But I think so many people think of you as the fighter and the legend and everything. What about you, kind of stepping back in there?
Well, I signed up. I'm an owner of it, one of the owners of it, and that I'm the president, and I'm not going to be able to. At least I feel like I want to be able to give opportunities to these young guys coming up, opportunities to be able to follow their dreams, to be able to fight, and for me to be able to live my own dream because I love bare knuckle, and I want to be able to have these guys be able to experience what I experienced. So I won't be stepping in there. I'm going to be the president. I'm going to stay in my lane and do my job.
There was, I guess, a rumor out there. Maybe he started the rumor that Mark Coleman was going to be a part of it. And he was going to get into it, and that the two legends of MMA were going to get in there. Was that ever thought of or ever a possibility?
No, that was just some trash talk. Me and him having some fun with it. It was nothing serious.
Now, as far as you staying officially retired from MMA, are you officially done fighting MMA as well?
Yes, I'm out. I'm doing pro wrestling now, and I'm working on Valor BK.
Awesome, and I've noticed in social media lately, a lot of guys kind of, for whatever stupid reason, Moose and Brian Cage, a little bit of trash talking from these Impact Wrestling guys.
Yeah, when it's pro wrestling, I always like to chime in and have some fun with these guys, and sometimes it might get a little serious, and they might get me out of my chair and have to come and put a beating on them.
I don't know if these guys quite realize what they're saying. You know what I mean? I mean, they may be big guys, and Moose may have been an NFL player, and Brian Cage may be in great shape. But do you think they know kind of what they're getting into when they're kind of trash talking like that?
I think they know what they're doing. I mean, they're not dumb, but I also know that when it comes face to face, it'll be a little different story. So, but they're on social media. Everybody's brave.
Of course. And I always find it interesting that, with a lot of these newer guys, they keep coming at, with the Attitude Era guys. They keep coming after them. Why do you think that is? Is it because obviously that's when everyone was watching and you guys have the most name value, or is there something else at play here?
It's jealousy, man. They know we were the bomb, so they're jealous.
It is crazy that they're saying, the Attitude Era is dead. I mean, obviously the Attitude Era was 20 years ago or so, but those are the names that so many casual fans still recognize and still gravitate to. That is, that's the big era of wrestling that was so huge. It broke records.
Absolutely, and when people are successful and people have names, other people that are trying to reach that mountaintop want to latch onto those names and try to make a name for themselves off of those names.
When you were in the WWF, obviously, we mentioned before, Intercontinental Champion, Tag Team Champion, but getting into WWF, I don't think people realize you were actually a pro wrestler first and then an MMA fighter. Do you find that a lot of people kind of get it opposite? They thought MMA first, then wrestling?
Yeah, I do, because it was so long ago, and I went under Vince Torelli. So I think that they missed that era. Like, they don't know that that's who I am.
At that point, how did you get in at that point when you were Vince Torelli? Like, who was training you at that juncture?
Yeah, I'd actually done some stuff with Buzz Sawyer in Sacramento at the time, and that kind of fell through. So then I went up and started training with Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson up there in Mooresville, North Carolina, and that's really where I learned how to wrestle.
And was wrestling kind of your first love, or were you always hoping and thinking that MMA was going to come around and that you'd like to do that?
Well, no, football is something that I did. That's something that I had a chance to really play NFL, and then I had the opportunity to kind of veer off and go do some wrestling. So I chose to do that. But I did, like I said, I did have a really good opportunity to play pro ball, and Chargers were one of the ones that I had gotten a letter from early on in my obviously younger days. But, yeah, so it was something I was interested in. My first love was football.
That is great, and obviously you changed gears, went to pro wrestling, had some success there, but then you really go to Japan and become the king of pancrase and become huge, and that's kind of how you really made a name for yourself. When you're kind of going through it and you're creating the sport, what is that like? Because you're really kind of setting the tone for what would be $1 billion business.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great, like I said, it was a great time, and being able to be some of those guys during that Attitude Era was an awesome privilege and an opportunity. But to set the standard, you really don't even think about it. You're just going through the motions. You're trying to be great now.
And man, what a career! I mean, you think about first King of Pancrase, then really you're starting modern MMA in the United States. You have the Hoist Gracie feud. You become the super fight champion. I mean, which is really the first real heavyweight champion in UFC. At that point, is that a big honor that you're the champion, or like you said, you're just trying to do your thing and become great because the King of Pancrase, then UFC, really started to make a big name for yourself.
Yeah, because it's like if you ever turned around and started to celebrate your belt that you won, then the next thing you know, you're losing fights. So I was always winning belts wherever I went, but it was like, where's the next challenge? I wasn't ready to stop and celebrate.
And I think a lot of people remember the feud with Hoist Gracie and that kind of being like one of the big first headliners, and then Dan Severn obviously as well. And what were your thoughts on early UFC as far as talent level and really showing all your skills?
Yeah, the UFC was different, though. Like Japan, you had to really be well-rounded because they stood you up. You got a rope escape. So you had to be good at striking. You had to be good on the ground because you know you were going to be there. So I really believe that UFC, you could be a great wrestler and you could hold people down and ground and pound them, and you could not, especially during that time, you didn't get exposed because there was only a couple guys like myself and Hoist that could expose you on the ground. So a lot of the guys, all they had to do was be good wrestlers and be able to punch you on the ground, and they could win.
That is a great point, and obviously in Japan against Bas Rutten or Suzuki or Maury Smith, you're fighting all these different guys, but it can go a lot of different ways. And you guys were really kind of the first guys that knew ground game. You knew the striking. You had like a complete game. Now in modern MMA, it seems like everybody kind of doesn't have a specialty. They kind of just have that complete game, and you guys were the first ones to really do that.
Well, think about this. Everybody that was in Pancrase that fought in the UFC won.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, look at yourself and Bas Rutten, for sure. And Maury Smith.
Yep. Maury Smith. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on. Frank Shamrock. I mean, the list goes on.
Yep. So true. You guys definitely set it off and were kind of the originators. I mean, you really were complete fighters. Is that always something that you wanted to strive to be, not just a specialist? Do you want to be a complete fighter?
Absolutely. I stressed that early on, and I remember in an interview before anybody ever knew that striking was going to be needed, I said early on, even when grappling was winning, and I said, you're going to have to be well-rounded at stand-up and the ground in order to compete in this years down the road. And that was way back, in '95 and '96. I made those statements, and that was before that's before the strikers started to win.
And another thing that I don't even know if you realized you did, it was like you had charisma, you had, maybe it's from pro wrestling, but you had like a star quality that a lot of the other guys, quite frankly, didn't have. Is that something that was important to you, kind of making yourself a huge star as well?
It was. I thought that my interest to the fans was that I never wanted to let anybody down. I wanted to make sure that the fans enjoyed my fighting. I know it's weird because a lot of fighters say they don't care what the fans think, which is probably a good thing, right? But I did. I cared about how my fights went and whether or not the fans were watching me. I saw the importance to that early on about you have to be different than everybody else. You've got to want the fans to want to see you fight, or otherwise you're not going to be there. You could be good, but if you lose one fight, you're gone because they're looking for people to come in and buy tickets. And I understood that really early on.
And you were definitely a huge, huge draw throughout your career, like I said, against whether it's Severn or Hoist Gracie, but really kind of the trilogy fight, or the real thing that people I think forget that brought UFC really into the mainstream was the feud with Tito Ortiz.
Yes, that was the mainstream where we got on the Best Damn Sports Show. It started to be going on mainstream TV, and it really opened up a lot of doors for the UFC.
Now, what were your thoughts on Tito? Real hatred, or building up a little bit to kind of make sure that this fight gets as much popularity and mainstream attention as it was going to get?
No, it was because I was really so frustrated at myself, not necessarily him, even though he was the one that took the brunt of it, because I wasn't as good as I used to be, and I kept trying to push myself to be that good, but I was long in the tooth, I was older, and I just felt like I could beat him. I knew I could beat him, and yet I couldn't beat him.
Yeah, he was definitely in his prime, and obviously your prime was probably a little bit before that. But as far as UFC is concerned and the numbers, you guys really set off UFC for a bit there, and you guys were doing big numbers, and that was really the first time their pay-per-views were actually, really, really sought after.
Yes, and there's always arguments about what did what, but there's no doubt in my mind that the Tito and the Shamrock trilogy is what built the UFC.
I totally agree, and I always thought that, and I felt like whether you do it intentionally or not, or however it's set up, it's almost like pro wrestling. You made Tito Ortiz a star, whether you meant to or not.
Right, exactly, and I knew that too going into it, that I was the older fighter. They couldn't lose on this one. If I won, I'm still the star. If I lose, they created a young star.
Very much like the pro wrestling world, right? I mean, it's very, very similar. It's kind of the godfather of pro wrestling.
It's passing the torch, right? It's an obligation. I didn't want to walk away without making sure that I gave everything that I got. And then if I didn't have anything left, I made sure that I passed the torch on to someone else.
And I think a lot of the fans out there, like we were talking about before, Attitude Era and things like that, so many people remember you from signing with Vince McMahon's WWF and starting out not only as a referee for Bret Hart versus Steve Austin, which so many people remember as one of the greatest matches of all time, but the In Your House 97 match, Cold Day in Hell versus Vader. A lot of people still bring that up to you, how awesome that match was and kind of a great debut for the WWF that really was?
It was, and it does get brought up a lot because people talk about it because they thought that it was a shoot. Even the boys in the locker room, when we went back there, they kept asking if we were okay. It was like, what are you talking about? So me being as green as I was, not having the experience there, and to be able to put on a match where people were asking if you were okay, I was pretty darn good.
Say the least.
Right.
I think that Vader was like kind of the perfect opponent for you too. I mean, big guy, could take a beating, very, very good worker. Was he kind of that perfect opponent for you when you started?
Yeah, I thought they matched me well because it gave me an opportunity to go in there and get comfortable, because I didn't have to worry about whether or not if I touched him that he was going to whine about it. And so I really appreciated that the thought that they put into that to give me him my first match because I didn't have to think about a whole lot. I just went out and I was just me. Obviously we weren't trying to hurt each other, but we were sparring, right? We were touching each other. We were making sure you knew we were there. And that's kind of what we did was we just sparred. We went after one another and we sparred. So I was really appreciative that they put me with him because I think anybody else, I think it might have been a disaster because they probably would have crawled under the ring and quit.
Yeah, they would have for sure been scared of you a little bit too. I mean, World's Most Dangerous Man is not just a gimmick.
Exactly, and I'm thumping them a little bit, and they don't know the difference between what I do and what they do, and they're thinking I'm trying to hurt them.
It was such a cool thing to kind of have you debut for them because it changed things up. I mean, a lot of people didn't know you were a wrestler beforehand, but it just was like, wow, a legitimate guy is in there, and it just elevated everyone in the WWF at that point and just added to that roster. You had, the Bret Harts of the world, the Shawn Michaels of the world. Eventually you feud with a guy like The Rock. I mean, at that point, their talent roster was so great. Did you think that going in? Were you smart to the business as far as wow, they got a lot of good guys that I can work with here?
Not necessarily. Ask that question again.
When you went in, did you know who was good, who wasn't? Okay, Shawn Michaels is a good wrestler. That's going to make me elevate my game. Or I like this kid, The Rock. I see some potential in him. Or maybe even a Bret Hart. Wow, Bret Hart. He's a great wrestler as well. WWF has a lot of guys to work with.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I noticed was I've got an opportunity to work with a lot of guys, a lot of top talent, and I appreciated that. And I think a lot of it had to do was I was able to transition from the Vader match and then transition into pro wrestling without running people off because none of those top guys would have worked with me if I would have still had the same kind of match that I was having with Vader. They would have said, no, we'll pass. But I really believe that I had a great first match and I was able to understand what was okay and what wasn't okay.
Absolutely, and so many people remember your feud with The Rock. You both, got over big with that, and also great feud with Owen Hart. That was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, he's a tremendous person, great athlete, good hand. I love working with him, along with his brother Brett. Those guys, they just really enjoyed working with those guys.
Now, when you win the Intercontinental title and you win the tag title with Big Boss Man, you become a dual champion at one point. You're getting a big push kind of on top of the world there. Is that important to you? Does that mean anything? To us as fans, wow, this is awesome. This is great. But to you yourself, does that mean a lot to be champion?
Absolutely. It does because it really kind of puts an exclamation point on the desire for you to be great. You're recognized as being great. Same thing with the Hall of Fame. You want to make sure that you're recognized as being great in your career, not just in front of the fans, but in your career. And I think the Hall of Fame does that. I think the belt basically solidifies that you're right now in front of the fans the best, and that puts you on top of the hill, and everybody's trying to knock you off.
You are a UFC Hall of Famer, and I know you talked about this before. Do you want to be in the WWF Hall of Fame? Are you surprised? Actually, WWE, really. Are you surprised you're not in the WWE Hall of Fame? Is that something that weighs on your mind?
Yeah, I want to be in. I mean, like I said, it's the exclamation point on a career, and I thought I did enough to change wrestling. And if you can change the way people do things in your sport, then you have done something very, very great, and you should be recognized for that in the Hall of Fame. So I thought that I'd done enough. There was no tap outs before me. There was very little submissions. Now it's in every single match. So I think that, I did a lot there. And I was able to have some great matches, work with all the top talent. Am I surprised? I think I would be surprised if I don't get in the next 5 years. I'll be surprised. I don't know about now. Being surprised because I think that it is a process. But I will be very shocked and very upset if I'm not the first one to go in that crossed over from MMA or MMA into wrestling if I'm not the first one that goes in.
I think you definitely should be there, but it's weird with the Hall of Fame. They say like kind of Vince just picks it on a whim. So sometimes people that deserve to be in, maybe that person's not on his mind. Have you heard that? Like it's just almost like whoever Vince kind of thinks of that day is going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, it would be, I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. I think they would have to have a panel of some sort and then talk about names. And, I mean, it may happen like that, but it just doesn't seem like that would be the way that Vince would go about business.
And also, you mentioned tap outs and submissions. That, the ankle hold, I mean, that became big, obviously, from Kurt Angle, but can't forget that you're the one that made that, popular, and you innovated it.
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because they always show the best submission holds, and they always got Kurt Angle doing the ankle lock, even though he can't do it like I do it. He doesn't do it right.
Right. It's so right on that, and it's so accurate. But as we head towards the wind down, we head towards the finish line. You've had such an amazing career, pro wrestling and MMA. Is that just an impossible thing to kind of pull off what you were able to do with your career if you think about it looking back? Because to do both, is extremely hard. To do one and be successful is extremely hard. You're able to be successful in both. Looking back, is it just amazing that you're able to be on the top of both games?
Yeah, it is. I mean, because they're quite the opposite, right? So it would be really hard to make the transition, but I don't know. There's just something in my brain that allows me to understand the difference between, entertainment and real.
As far as pro wrestling, do you have some favorite matches? Like I know I mentioned like Owen and The Rock and obviously the match with Vader, but do you have some other favorite matches you've had throughout your career?
Yeah, like I said, I think The Rock and me had a great program. I think King of the Ring, where we got to have that match in the tournament there. That was one of my favorites because that just right there just made me feel like I'm here and I'm here to stay. So it really made a great point to the fans and to everybody there and to myself that I wasn't here for a short time, that I was important to the organization.
Absolutely. King of the Ring 98, that was a big win, and obviously that means a lot, especially at that point, because everyone that wins the King of the Ring, Steve Austin's of the world, the Triple H's of the world, Bret Hart, I mean, it is a big deal to be the King of the Ring in the WWF.
Yes, and so I was really honored that I got that, and I was quite shocked that I got it because I would have thought that The Rock would have won it.
Yeah, that is very true. Who was obviously destined for greatness himself, obviously.
Right.
Now, what would you say is kind of the biggest misconception about Ken Shamrock?
Oh, I think that the way that I enter in the ring and the way that I conducted myself as a fighter, I think a lot of people have a misconception of how mean I am, or that I'm just a beast or something like that. But I'm actually a really nice person. Yeah, I think that's a misconception. I think people don't realize that I'm a pretty soft guy.
It's hard to believe. The world's most dangerous man.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Now, as far as yourself, what would you say when it's all said and done, if somebody's looking back at Ken Shamrock, whether it's wrestling, MMA, bare knuckle fight, what is the legacy that Ken Shamrock leaves behind?
Oh, I would have to say that, obviously being able to be on the top of both industries, very talented, a gifted athlete, but at the same time, and it's hard because I don't even know if I'll be remembered, but I know the people outside of it will know that I was a person that cared about people. I cared about kids and at-risk kids, and I worked with them, and I gave them opportunities, and I gave fighters, just like with this Valor Bare Knuckle, I gave these guys opportunities to be able to follow their dreams. I wasn't just a guy that went out and wanted to make sure that I was a champion, I was great. I also wanted to turn around and give back and give other people opportunity to do the same.
Now, one last time, I got to mention Valor Bare Knuckle Fighting 9/21 is the huge show out in Newtown, North Dakota at Four Bears Casino and Lodge. It's going to be on pay-per-view. Please give us one last plug for this huge, huge bare-knuckle fighting show and tell us why we should watch.
It's Valor Bare Knuckle, September 21st at Four Bears Casino in North Dakota. And the reason why people should watch is, at least in my opinion, when we did bare knuckle early on, people wanted them to stand up, and they kept screaming it. But yet we kept putting gloves and adding rules, and pretty soon people just bought into what we were doing. And not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I was a submission guy. But now we're going to give people what they've always wanted to see. We're going to stand them up.
I love it. And obviously, where can they actually see this? It's going to be on pay-per-view and everything. Is this going to be streaming and everything as well?
Yeah, Fight TV will be the streaming, and then we've got In Demand, and we got all the major cable networks. So we have the availability the same as the UFC did when they were on pay-per-view. We have all those connections.
Now, for all those fans out there that want to reach out and touch you, they want to find out more information, they want to read your social media, what are some of your social media plugs as well?
Yeah, it's KenShamrock.com, and I've got all my social medias on my website. But if you're interested in Valor BK in any aspect, fighter, ring announcer, judge, go to ValorBK.com, and you can check out, fill the form out, and tell them what you want to do. Or if you're just a fan and you want to read the news, ValorBK.com.